Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we're going to do a little mod to the FTX Outback Mini 2.0. When out running the trucks, one of the things I noticed was they're a bit tippy, and tackling slope sometimes they struggle for front end grip. I think if we move the centre of gravity down a bit for stability and forwards to get more weight over the front wheels, it should improve things. Right then, just like almost every 1/10 scale truck, the wheels are held on with a nylock nut. They are rather small of course, but once removed the wheels should just pull away from the axle. If they're a bit stubborn, don't keep pulling at the axle, instead press the end of the thread through the wheel. The parts are all quite small, so it wouldn't be at all difficult to bend something if you're not careful. One of the great things with these little trucks that really surprised me when I read about it is the wheels are bead locks. They're a nice simple design with just 4 screws clamping them together, so much nicer than glued tyres. Remove all 4 screws and take the wheels apart. They can be a bit sticky, so a fingernail under the edge of the wheel just to gently pry the bits apart is sometimes needed. We need the 2 halves of the wheel removed, and then the tyre stretches over the centre ring to separate it. Hobby Plus, another brand used on these trucks, does a nice set of machined wheel weights that replace the centre ring, making for a very tidy setup. Now usually I would just order a set and fit them, but right now with what's going on in the world, things are taking a little bit longer to arrive, and I kind of want to do the mod now. So I called the 3D printer into action again and printed some bits. What we have is a replacement for the centre ring that's made up of 3 parts. Because of the way the 3D printer works, making it as a single part isn't really practical, but it's still easy enough to assemble. Before we do though, here's a rendered view so you can see the shape of the bits, as the black parts can be a bit difficult to see the details on in the video. The 2 side bits have a ridge that locks into the tyre bead, and the centre ring has 4 cutouts that lock into the wheel parts for alignment, just like the stock part. To assemble, all we need to do is pop one of the sides over the centre ring with the ridge towards the outside. Make sure the ring is flush to the side part and add a spot of thin cyanoacrylate. Then leave it to dry fully. Then repeat with the other side part, leave that to dry, and it's ready for the next step. Now for efficiency, it's best to glue up a few at a time. If you make up 4, you can play around with different setups, and a 5th one isn't a bad idea, as at this stage they are rather delicate. If you grip them a bit too firmly, they will just crack. If we compare one of the new parts with the stock one, you can see that they're quite similar, except the new parts have a hollow centre and slightly taller sides. You do lose a little bit of space inside the tyre for the tyre to squish and deform, but not enough to cause any problems because the truck's so lightweight. For weight, well, I've had this solder on the shelf for a few months, and as solder it's really pretty awful. The consistency of the flux is a bit hit or miss, so I've not used it. For the wheels though, it'll make a great, easy to fit weight. All we need to do is wind it around the centre ring, trying to keep it fairly even until we're up to the outside edge. Then, to fix it in place, we just add a few more drops of thin cyanoacrylate. This will stick down the loose end as well as glue the solder to the sides of the ring, making it a very solid lump. Now before continuing, it's very important that you let the glue dry fully. We need the glue to have stopped vapping off before we seal it inside the tyre. As before, make up a full set and leave them for an hour or 2. So here we are then, sometime later. What we need to know now is just how much heavier are the new rings. Well, it just so happens I have a small set of scales. They're probably not the most accurate. They were very cheap from Hobby King after all, but we should get a feel for the difference. First then is the stock part. It's just a simple plastic moulding, so unsurprisingly it weighs next to nothing at 1.9 grams. Next is our custom part, which comes in at 12.1 grams, 12 grams. So that's roughly 6 times the weight. Not bad, I think. Those numbers are all well and good, but it doesn't really give you a feel. 12 grams is still pretty light after all. So as a comparison, let's weigh the battery that comes with the truck. And that's 13 grams. That means it's going to be fairly close to having 2 extra batteries mounted to the front axle. That's quite a big difference. To fit the new part, the assembly is the reverse of disassembly. The only fiddly bit is getting the tyre over the new ring, as it's a bit of an extra stretch. The tyres are so soft though, it's not too difficult. We need to make sure the tyre bead is sat nice and evenly around the edge of the ridge. We don't want it to get pinched when the wheel halves go back in. When refitting the wheel halves, you might need to run a sharp knife around the inside of the ring. It's a small part with fairly tight tolerances, and if you've used a 3D printer before, especially a cheap one, you'll know they're not perfect. Usually just taking a hair's width of plastic off the corner is all it needs. Refit the 4 screws, remembering that they're small self-tappers going into soft plastic, so you need to be extra careful not to strip the threads. They really don't need to be tight, just nipped up so the 2 wheel halves come together. Pop the wheel back on the axle and refit the nut. Repeat on the other side, and we've got the front axle weighed up, ready to go. In the next section of this week's video, we'll do some very unscientific tests. The ground is incredibly loose, so it took a little while to see a consistent difference. When the trucks are up to the axles in dirt, they're pretty equal. Later on, after wetting a section and adjusting the angle of the climb, the advantages did start to show. In the first set of videos, the yellow-green Peso has the front weights and the Land Rover Ranger was completely stock. Later, we added a set of 4 weights to the Ranger. I'll pop some text in the bottom corner there with the current setup of the trucks. What we found then was with the front weights, the hill climbing improved quite a bit when there was some grip available. Adding weights to the rear didn't really improve the hill climbing, but it did make it a bit more stable when leaning over to one side. I think a rock crawling course would make it quite a bit more clear just how much of an improvement there was. And it looks like we've got at least another couple of weeks at home, so there's plenty of time for that. I just so happen to have a pile of mixed-size rubble that could be laid out fairly easily. Just need to clear the weeds from a bit more of the garden. Anyway, that's it for this week. STL files for the 3D printed parts should be up on Thingiverse as long as I remember to do it. If they're missing, shout at me in the comments and I'll sort them out. And while I'm thinking about it, have you got your own isolation project on the go? Maybe a garden course or a new truck for when we're allowed outside again? If so, join our Discord server and share some pictures. There's a link in the description to get started. As always then, thanks for watching, like if you liked, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment if there's something on your mind. Bye guys!